Hi, it's Lynne and welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm a writer and entrepreneur, and through decades of writing articles for magazines and newspapers and authoring books, I've learned that we succeed through inspiration from storytelling and deep and mutually beneficial relationships. This show began in 2018 after my father was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I wanted a way to capture his stories and record his insights. It's grown since then to share stories of how people around the world make meaning from very ordinary pursuits. Now I focus on sharing the stories of writers, authors, and those in the world of publishing to learn how and why we create stories that help us make meaning from the mundane. I'm a former journalist and marketing entrepreneur, and I've been teaching writing for more than 2 decades. As a writing coach, I help authors build their brands and share their words. I've had 8 books published already, and I just finished my second novel, so stay tuned for news about when and where you can read it. If you'd like to write with me, check out my offerings at lynnegalodner.com. And you'll find more episodes of this podcast at makemeaning.org, as well as on every podcast platform you can think of. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts. Thank you for tuning in to the Make Meaning podcast, where you'll find stories of courageous people daring to share their talent with the world. Now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. I have a great opportunity coming up in January 2023 called the Author Brand and Marketing Mastermind. This is a 12-week program for which I'm only going to accept 10 writers, and there are just a few spots left. It's a great opportunity to delve into your writer brand and also create a marketing plan that you feel confident to implement. Today, we all know that writers, no matter whether they're published with a big publishing house or self-publishing or somewhere in the middle, have to help out with the marketing of their works. If you want to sell books, if you want to get your writing published, if you really want to build a name for yourself as a writer, this is the course for you. I am now accepting applications for registration, and you can learn more at lynnegalodner.com. Get your spot before it's sold out. Rosina Lippi may be better known as Sarah Donati, the pen name she uses for her beautiful literary historical fiction series of 6 novels set in upstate New York between the years of 1792 and 1825. She has also written 2 books on later generations of the same families under her own name. I fell in love with the Wilderness series of novels to the point that tears streamed down my face after I closed the 6th and final book, which includes an epilogue about what happens to all the beloved characters in time. That wave of emotion inspired me to search for the author online, and I was delighted to find websites and an email, and even more delighted when Rosina wrote me back. Today, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome Rosina Lippi to the Make Meaning podcast. She is a former academic and tenured university professor who taught at the University of Michigan while I was a student there, though our paths never crossed. Since 2000, she has devoted all her time to writing, drawn mostly to stories grounded in history. Rosina lives on Puget Sound with her husband, daughter, Havanese pupper named Jimmy Dean, and a rambunctious cat called Bella. She grew up in Chicago, but can trace her roots to the very beginnings of America and descends directly from men who fought in the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. Rosina was the first person in her family to earn a college degree, and she went on to attain a master's and a PhD as well. She has more than 1 million words in print with major publishers. Rosina, welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. Well, Rosina, welcome to the Make Meaning podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. And I'm going to admit up front that I am a huge fan of your writing, and I could not put down the books of the Wilderness series. I absolutely fell in love with the Bonner family and the gorgeous way you describe the forests of upstate New York. So I want to start there.
Okay.
I wonder if you would tell me how this series came to be and what motivated you to turn out 6 gorgeous books about the journeys of generations of this clan.
Right. Well, the second question is the easier one. The mortgage is always what motivates me. Writing is not easy. I do need to be motivated by something. How it started was when I was still teaching. I taught a course in historical fiction, and I had this a game I used to play with the students where they were college students, but I would say, okay, so take a really well-known classic novel
Mm-hmm.
and then I used Pride and Prejudice,
Okay.
and think of the main character. Okay, now go to a approximately similar time period,
Mm-hmm.
another novel,
Mm-hmm.
and take one of those characters and put them in the same room.
Okay.
So I said, so what I did was I put Natty Bumppo from Last of the Mohicans.
Uh-huh.
That's the name in the original
Yeah.
novels,
Yeah.
with Elizabeth Bennet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, how are these two going to get along?
Uh-huh.
Right. And that's kind of, it stuck in my head. And then eventually I was very motivated by the fact that all of the novels about European settlements,
Mm-hmm.
the nice word, in the East were written by men with
Mm-hmm.
women as kind of props.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Cooper could not write dialogue to save his life. I defy thee, wretched Huron. So I thought, I'd like to retell at least part of one of these stories with real women in it, and that's basically how it all got started. So it was the pioneers that
Mm-hmm.
I started with, and I stuck Elizabeth Bennet in the middle of all that,
Mm-hmm.
and that was how it got started.
So now tell me where you were at this point in your career. Did you already have books out, or was this like a first stop and you were querying agents, or like tell me how
Uh-huh.
it all began?
Well, I was an assistant professor of linguistics at the University of Michigan,
Mm-hmm. My alma
and
mater.
yeah,
Yep.
and just completely busy. I had a toddler. To keep sane, I needed to do something else. So I got up like an hour earlier than I needed to every day to write fiction.
Okay.
And the first novel I finished was Homestead, which I published under my name.
Okay.
And that's the one that won the Penn Hemingway Award.
Okay.
And I was writing Homestead and Into the Wilderness, and my most famous academic publication, which is still in print,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. I was writing
Mm-hmm.
three books at the
Oh
same
my
time.
gosh. Wow.
Yeah. I look back and I think my therapist said at the time, there's more than one kind of depression.
Uh-huh.
Some people have to go to bed and just ignore the world, and other people start running at full speed. And you're the second kind.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yep.
that's, I guess, where my energy came from. But so then I finished all three, and then Homestead sold first,
Okay.
and then my agent got some interest going in Into the Wilderness. She said, Bantam's very interested,
Mm-hmm.
and but they're going to want you to use a pen name because they're worried about confounding reader expectation with.
Mm-hmm.
For my first novel was so different from Into the Wilderness. So I said, fine. And that's how it got started.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And so did you know when you started writing Into the Wilderness, did you envision a series, or was it the kind of thing that just sort of came in time?
Well, I was hoping for a series because, being practical, you put a lot of research
Yeah,
into these books. And, if you're going to jump from period to period to country, you have to start from scratch every time.
right.
And so I thought, I'd like to, and I'm not done with the characters, so
Okay.
I need to carry on here. So I had a proposal for the second novel, and
Hmm.
they bought both novels. Bantam bought them as a pair,
Okay.
and even though it wasn't written yet, and then people will say, "Is there going to be a third one? Is there going to be a third one?" And I'd say, "Depends on how the second one sells,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's basically how it went. But yeah, I never hit the bestseller list. I think I would be termed a mid-list author,
Huh. Wow.
but they've sold consistently and really well
Yeah,
over 20 some years. So
that's amazing.
yeah, my agent says actually that's a much nicer
Yeah.
thing to present to a publisher than
Yeah.
a couple days on a bestseller list. Is not as interesting as 20 years of profit. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
I have a couple questions about specifics in your research for this series. So there were, issues of race and indigeneity, and really very forward-thinking characters in terms of not seeing those differences, not being willing to
Right.
adhere to them. And so, tell me a little bit about how that came to you and how you made it so authentic. Like, what kind of research did you have to do to really understand the relationships between communities and people, and also the animosities?
It wasn't hard to find out about the animosity and the aggression because that's very well documented for the Eastern tribes. It was easier. Let me just think about this. It's like, yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before. Yeah. I think what I tried to do was I've done and continued to do a lot of reading about colonial situations.
Okay.
And the absolute worst and the ones that were less toxic. So let's put it like that. And I was looking for a situation in which I could put Elizabeth Bennet and she would be open-minded enough to see what was going on. So I have, she's an unusual character, and some people say, oh, she's anachronistic, and I'm like, well, have you read Mary Wollstonecraft? I mean, there were women who thought the way she thinks. I tried to establish a character that I could then nurture through a lot of very different experiences. As far as indigenous communities, it's not hard to find current day, very blunt discussions about what colonialism has done to those communities and how they've survived. And I really wanted to focus more on the survival than on the decimation.
Yeah, that's great.
How much courage and just grit it took to survive in those circumstances.
Yeah.
To survive in a community.
Yeah. And so then, but you also had several locales, like you have upstate New York, but you have Montreal, you have Scotland, you have New Orleans. So how much of that did you do just in terms of, first primary and secondary research, but also how much did you go to places and really immerse to get a sense of it?
Yeah. Well, upstate New York, my family, both sides of my family settled in upstate New York when they came from Europe. So I have long back history there. And I have ancestors in all 13 of the original colonies.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. On my mother's side. On my father's side, they came from Italy in the 1870s, and they settled in the Hudson Valley. So I was really familiar with New York State and upstate New York. So that was less work, except I had to kind of study as a naturalist, things I hadn't really thought about very much there.
Okay.
And my husband is a very serious hiker and mountaineer, and he kind of directed my readings. People are always very quick to tell you when you've made a mistake, and that's fine. I do not take offense, but I had an eagle building a nest out of the wrong material. And my favorite was the person who wrote to say that I had the wrong kind of bells on the sleigh for that period.
Oh my gosh. Well, that just ruins the whole thing. I mean, come on, right.
But that I spent more time. I everything for Scotland was done long distance in terms of. I have some friends who are Scots.
Okay.
I could talk to them about various things, especially about language stuff, and that always interests me because my PhD is in linguistics.
Right.
I wanted to avoid the mistakes that usually show up in those books about people speaking Scots when they would have been speaking Gaelic. And, New Orleans was a very different case. New Orleans, I did go a couple times to New Orleans, and I really needed to do that because the atmosphere is so distinct.
Oh, yeah.
And I was able to tour some, old houses, and I learned a huge amount from that. It was kind of eye-opening, really. A lot of the details in Queen of Swords came directly from one of those visits, about and you probably don't remember, but there's a thing about a fan, a board that hangs from the ceiling. It's perforated, and somebody has to pull a cord to swing it back and forth.
Oh.
And it's like an early fan.
Okay.
And
interesting.
so, I fit that into a scene. And of course, there were slaves around to do that. And so the idea was, to make the slaves not to be props, but to have them
Yeah.
be real people. And
Yeah.
I worked very hard at that. And New Orleans was so, people have weird ideas about New Orleans at this time. There were really two very distinct communities, black and white. And the black community was very structured and very strict in its own way. You know, all this stuff about men with mulatto women having secondary households. Some of that did go on, but not nearly as much as, you know, the media would have you imagine or believe. And I really wanted to make sure that people got a sense of what it meant to be a slave on a sugar farm or on a cotton farm. I'll tell you, this is the story of how I know that I succeeded in I succeeded at least in part. My husband always waits and listens to the audio. He doesn't read the book. He was listening to the audio for Queen of Swords, and he turned to me and he said, "How much of this did you make up with the sugar trains?" And I said, "That's all factual." And he said, And then I knew he was going to do this. He went and fact checked me. And he was shocked. And I was like, well, it is shocking. It is shocking what went on. And so
That's really cool. You know, after I read it, we were actually in New Orleans for a wedding, and I hadn't been there since I was like a teenager. And so we did a little tour, and we got to Congo Square, and I'm like, wait, I know something about this because I read your book. And it was like, it had a totally different feel to it, so that was very cool. I definitely learned a lot. So you mentioned when we started the conversation that your publisher wanted you to use a pen name. And so, of course, when I, looked for you after I finished the 6th book and I found that it's very well known what your real name is, I was so tickled. And I just wanted to hear about that story because I know there are writers that use pen names and nobody knows who they are. So tell me a little bit about that thought process.
I mean, how I came to that name or what?
But also why? Why did your publisher want that?
Yeah, well, Homestead, which came out first, is a very quiet set of 12 interlinked stories. And it's about a very small community in the Alps in Western Austria near Switzerland. And it's based on my own. I lived there for almost 3 years when I was doing the research for my dissertation, and I interviewed people constantly. That was my field methods, was to get people to talk as unobtrusively as possible. So that's what my research was based on. And then all those stories were in my head. And so I finally sat down and wrote the novel that's the interconnected stories. And then Into the Wilderness is like, it's hard to imagine something more different, really. And so they were just worried about, because it had just won the Penn Hemingway Award, they were worried about just confusing readers. And they use that expression, confounding reader expectation. So they said, no, we'd like a pen name. And then they told me, we want it in the middle of the alphabet, no Z's, no A's. And I thought, well, screw you. If I have to do this, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And so I went through the Italian genealogy stuff I have, and I found what I was comfortable with, and I used it. But I never made a secret of it. And it was not my idea. So it was not like I set out to do it thinking I have to keep this part of my life. Although, some people would have done that, because I didn't yet have tenure at the University of Michigan when all of this happened. And, they look for any excuse to boot you in the tenure process. And I knew that if, they found out I was writing novels, they say, oh, yeah, so why didn't you write, 10 more articles or whatever? But I had a lot of publications academically, so I didn't have to really worry about it. And so I was very open about, the internet was just getting going at that point. And when it was a couple years later that I set up a first website, and I was right there. I said, this is the me, and this is the Sarah me. And so that's just the way it's gone since.
So how has publishing changed during your career?
Oh my God, it's hard to say how it hasn't changed. when I started, I got a really great offer from Bantam. I got
Uh-huh.
a really good 2-book deal,
Uh-huh.
really good. And
Uh-huh.
8 years later, 2008, everything crashed
Mm-hmm.
and they just stopped writing contracts for a good
Mm.
while.
Oh, wow.
And so it didn't matter what you brought them in terms of your either a finished manuscript or a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
They just, unless you were Stephen King or somebody on that level,
Mm-hmm.
they just weren't buying anything for a while.
Okay.
That did get better, obviously, but the advances never regained the same level that they
Mm-hmm.
had been before around 2000 or
Okay.
no, I guess it was 98. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
and the other thing is that my favorite thing about publishing to say was that if you imagine, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a period in like the 70s and 80s where houseplants were a huge deal and everybody had like a million houseplants. And it
Uh-huh.
was, all right. So people who remember that get this better. But
Uh-huh.
so say that the person A goes into a plant store, gorgeous. I want my whole house filled with gorgeous plants. I want that everybody will admire.
Mm-hmm.
And looks around and spends a ton of money and buys all these plants and goes home and then puts them in the closet and closes the door. And then, 3 weeks later, they open the door and the plants are all dead.
Yeah.
And the person says, "I'm so disappointed in you." And that's what publishing is like, right? They they
Oh, boy.
buy I don't know how many novels a
Uh-huh.
year
Mm-hmm.
and put absolutely nothing
Mm-hmm.
into promoting 95% of them.
Hmm.
And 95% of them sink,
Yeah.
into nothingness. It's kind of like a psychotic industry because, they cannot deal with reality. They set this idea up for themselves and they just pursue it, even though it's clear that it doesn't work. And then,
It's
okay, so that was the first thing, and then that got worse after 2008,
oh.
and then self-publishing came up, and that everything just changed completely at that point.
Yeah.
If you were already established with publishing houses, you could carry on pretty much as you had been, which I did. People who wanted to get started as novelists often had the idea, at least still now sometimes, but in the beginning, that they didn't need the publishers anymore, and they could just do this on their own and cut out the middleman. And so I'm sure you've seen the figures on what that's done to the income for full-time writers of fiction had dropped something like 60% over a period of time. So that is a big adjustment, and you have that to deal with. If I hadn't had a readership at that point, I don't know, I wouldn't have lasted very long.
It's interesting because, when I started in journalism and I was at the University of Michigan, I graduated in 93. And so I was a journalist for 15 years and self-publishing was not respectable. Like if you did it, it was because you had no other choice. And
That's
so,
exactly right.
that's what I was raised with and trained in. And I've had 2 poetry collections and 6 nonfiction books come out, all with small presses over the years. I never even looked at them as moneymakers. They were like labors of love because they were just small, and I was like thrilled to get them published. But I had other means of income. There was journalism, then I got into marketing, and I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So, and I've taught, college English for more than 20 years. But it's funny, I just finished a novel late last year and I just got it back from the editor. And I'm going to try to pitch an agent to give it that shot. But I also feel like, if it takes too long or it doesn't go well, I can self-publish at this point.
Well, you're in a unique position. Most people aren't.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
But it's like, I still feel a little bit like, like, how could I self-publish? That's just, you know what I mean? It's not valid, but it really is. And it's interesting because I know some younger writers who actually have done really well, agented, but also decided to put out something on their own while being represented in other works. And they're very
agents let them do that.
well, they're not New York Times bestsellers,
Yeah.
but they're making good money as
Mhm.
novelists. And
Mhm.
then they feel that it's a really seamless back and forth between publishing houses and self-publishing. And that was just
Mhm.
really eye-opening to me because,
Yeah.
you know,
I'd love to see some case studies on that because I have not run into that, but with younger people especially, I can imagine that will probably evolve in that direction. But for me, coming up in the same kind of an atmosphere where self-publishing was
frowned
just,
upon.
yeah,
Yeah.
just not something you thought about or did. Or today, still, my hackles go up
Mhm.
and it happens all the time when people
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you're a novelist.
Mhm.
Oh, have you published anything?" And I want to say to them, "Oh, what? Oh, you're a surgeon. Have you ever operated on anybody?"
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
then they say, "Oh, you self-published?" And I said, "Why would you assume that?
Right. Yeah.
Why would you assume that? No, I'm
Right.
not self-published."
Yeah.
And I can get really snippy,
Yeah.
and if when the questions are they're disrespectful in a
Oh,
way,
yeah. Yeah.
just assuming the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get this published, so you did it yourself. Now, some people choose to do it themselves, even though they have a very marketable thing
Well,
to
that's
work on.
really,
But that's
yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
then that wasn't the case,
Well,
you
I
know.
think it's because from what I hear, since it's not yet my experience,
Mhm.
the publishers don't put as much into marketing and PR as they did. So a lot of it still
No.
falls on the writers. And so they're like,
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
if
well,
I have
yeah.
to do this anyway, then why am I sharing my
Well,
profits? I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, no. I mean, that's like, putting the plants in the closet and closing
Yeah.
the door. They
Yeah.
they they invest a certain amount to start in an advance, but then nothing else.
Yeah.
The song and dance that your agent goes through
Hmm.
when, okay, they have an initial offer and now they have to work out the details. And that
Hmm.
includes things like promotions, reading tours, all that kind of stuff, which,
Hmm.
by the way, have pretty much disappeared since
Right.
2008.
Yeah.
And that's okay because I hated doing those.
Yeah.
I mean, we are novelists, I think, especially are on the whole introverts.
Oh, yes. Oh,
And
yes.
we prefer to be isolated with our own stuff in our minds and our million people running around in our heads.
Yeah.
And the more and more the publishers are saying, "Come out here and do this." And it's like, "Do you want me to sit here and write, or
Hmm.
do you want me to go out there and do marketing?" Which
Right.
I don't have any training for. I mean, I
Yeah.
can figure it out a lot of it, but they just don't see the disconnect.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. Um, have you seen the movie um, Stranger Than Fiction?
No.
Oh, you should see that movie.
Okay. Okay. I will.
That's a wonderful movie. It's about Emma Thompson is a world famous literary novelist, and her publisher is just anxious for her new book, and her characters are in a parallel universe
Uh-huh.
being affected by what she does. So it's really a wild thing. But the
Okay.
reason I was mentioning it is in the story and then in the movie,
Hmm.
the publisher is so desperate to have her finish this literary novel that
Hmm.
they send her a doula type person, somebody who yeah, who will take care of her and motivate her and get her to sit down at the typewriter. And I remember cracking up and thinking, oh my God. I mean, it could be that people who are as successful as Karen Slaughter or Stephen King or whoever
Uh-huh.
can afford to surround themselves with people that they hire to
Yeah.
support them and things that they need to get done. But a publisher who sends you a nursemaid, it just,
Yes. Just
um,
wouldn't happen.
it just wouldn't happen. But they needed that in the story and it worked really well. So I highly
Yeah.
recommend that movie
Oh,
because it's incredibly well done.
I'll check it out and I'll add it to the
Okay.
show notes for this episode too. It's funny when I pivoted my marketing business a few years ago before the
Mhm.
pandemic to get back to my writing and
Yeah.
teaching writing. And so for sort of bread and butter income, I
Mhm.
decided to sort of transition from working with the clients I'd been working with to working with writers to teach them how to market and to build
Oh,
author brands because it's so needed, regardless of which path they take. And this
Right.
was experience I have. I've worked with clients for 15 years. I'm really good at marketing other people. I can't
Mhm.
say I might be at marketing myself, but
Mhm.
I can definitely do it for others. And
Uh-huh.
so, it's not rocket science. It's just a skill you have to learn and
Yeah.
then exercise that muscle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm offering a mastermind in early 2023 about, building your author brand and learning the different marketing options, but then making choices, because
Right.
I know for me, you may feel this way. I know a lot of writers who are like, I don't want to do Instagram, or I'm not getting on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's not something I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But you can do other things. Like you can
Yeah.
have speaking engagements, you can speak to book clubs.
Right.
Do you prefer any particular, or maybe you don't even need to anymore with, your volume
Um,
of work, but is there a path that you've enjoyed where you connect with readers or you get the
um,
books out there?
well, I have a pretty large online community of
Mhm.
people who have stuck around since the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Who have been communicating both in a open community and then by email for
Uh-huh.
20 some years.
That's
And
amazing.
and it's nice. That's nice, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have much of a reach.
Okay.
I ran the weblog for I think 10 or 11 years,
Uh-huh.
every day, multiple posts.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was
Wow.
very successful. And
Okay.
it made a big, it had a presence in the
Okay.
industry.
Okay.
But then, weblogs faded away. And anyway, I didn't, 10 years was enough of that for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. It also takes your writing energy. So like if you're
Yes.
writing for that, are you
Yeah.
writing other things? It's like you can only do so much in a
Right.
day.
Well, I cheated kind of in that I wrote a lot about the research I was doing,
Ah,
and about things that I discovered and resources and I also wrote about. I was not teaching anymore by that point, and I
okay.
really missed teaching. I was,
Uh-huh.
I'm a good teacher,
Uh-huh.
and I missed teaching two courses most. One was
Hmm.
Introduction to Linguistics, and
Okay.
the other one was Introduction to Fiction.
Uh-huh.
And it's because in both cases, students come in thinking they know what they need to know. And in both cases, they're usually completely mistaken.
Okay.
I did that on the weblog. I provided a lot of basic information and about, POV and I did little, not contests, but I had people would participate in writing paragraphs and so forth. So, and I gave books away,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
just that people do. You have to imagine in the year, let's say 2012,
Uh-huh.
how many people did that reach? You
Right.
know,
Right.
not a hell of a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember it was about that time where I said to my agent, they just this marketing thing. And she
Hmm.
goes, well, there are people who do this but you're looking at 20, 30,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I can't do that.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
who's got that money.
So
So, mm,
what is the best feedback that you've received about your books? Like, is there a favorite letter, comment, or review or anything?
just just yesterday, I got an email from my agent,
Uh-huh.
and I finished a book earlier in the summer, and it's still in the editorial process, and
Okay.
I haven't gotten notes from my editor yet. But so I was just communicating with my agent. I said, "Well, I'm getting a little nervous about not hearing," and she wrote back this incredible email about the book, and the last line was, "I can't believe how lucky I am to be your agent."
Oh, that's amazing.
It
Oh my
was
God.
amazing. Yeah.
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 Wow.
And so that
That's
was one.
great.
But and the other thing that is very validating is I've heard from many, many people who've said things like, I spent 6 weeks in chemotherapy and your books got me through,
Oh,
or, I lost my husband or
mhm,
whatever. Or in the pandemic, my
mhm.
book sales jumped I think probably a lot of people book
Yeah.
sales jumped in the pandemic
Yeah.
because people were like, give me something to do. I got to
Yeah.
have something to read. So hearing from people who have found for whom the books have been somehow not transformative, but helpful in a
Yeah.
transition stage has been, that makes me feel like it's okay that I do this for a living. I don't have to be embarrassed that I sit here and stare at a screen all day.
So I'm sure you've gotten negative feedback, and I wonder
oh yeah.
how you've weathered that. You know, like
Uh-huh.
how do you not curl up in a ball and just cry? I mean, how do you handle it?
Well, you got to be pretty thick-skinned in academia. So I came through academia,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're funny. You can just laugh at them.
Yeah.
But I had an early Kirkus, I think it was Kirkus.
Okay.
Maybe the second or the third book. I can't remember. The those are like 5-line reviews.
Yeah.
And it was color by number cartoon caricatures.
And
I thought to myself, this person just was waiting for an opportunity to use that phrase. They had the phrase ready. They were looking for a place to use it. They thought, oh, let's do this.
Yeah.
And so I could step away from that. I didn't have to take it seriously. Other times, the most extreme negative reviews I've had have been similar. About a review that was really negative that I took very seriously. That sounds terrible if I say it that way, that I can't think of any. I hope to get all of the big bugs ironed out before the thing hits the shelves. So usually I'm pretty good at I can say, yes, this is an issue I should have addressed, or yes, I can see where, but mostly the stuff I remember, the person who wrote to me after Dawn on a Distant Shore, who said, well, I liked your first 2 books, but I'm never reading anything you write again because there was no need to kill the dog. And and I'm thinking to myself, and I wrote back and said, well, I'm sorry to lose you as a reader, but let me just ask you, are you sure the dog's dead? And he wrote back and said, it doesn't matter. You shot at the dog. And I thought, okay. Fine.
Yeah. Good luck. Nice knowing you.
Yeah. I never get mad at people who are angry at me because of something in one of the stories. I think, okay, well, you raise your money and you take your choices. So yeah.
So I'd love to hear about your writing process. I'm curious if you write daily or if you plan out your books before you write them.
Yeah, well, it changes. But when I first started writing fiction seriously, I had to fight for every, minute I could dedicate to it. And I would get up at, 5:30 and write until my daughter was up and the day started. And then I got tenure, so things are a little easier. And I could write a little more freely. And then I left the University of Michigan and moved to Washington State. 2 years after that, I left academia.
Okay.
That's a very long story, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But when I left academia, it's like being let out of prison. I had a really good academic career, so I'm not saying that it was. I was suddenly free of all of the structure. And that was not a good thing. That was because I suddenly, instead of having to fight for time to write, I had to figure out how I was going to live my life, and when I was going to write and when I wasn't going to write. And it was a pretty difficult transition. I still don't. This is 20 years now that I've been doing this full time. And I still am not really comfortable with it. But after 2008, I was in my 50s, I guess, and getting a job was impossible. So it's not like I could go back to a structured. I think I might have written better if I had like a half-time job, written more effectively and more quickly. So, yeah.
So, do you plan your books out? Do you map them out beforehand, or how do you do that?
I generally have a sense of what's happening. I have a sense of where it starts and what the crisis points are, and basically where it's going to end. But I don't plan it out, and I don't hold myself to any kind of a outline or anything like that. I don't myself understand really how it works in my head. To do it, because the novel I just finished, just the other day, I was kind of thinking, oh, I should read it again because, you spend 3 years writing it and you just don't want to see it anymore.
Yeah.
And I realized how incredibly complex the
Mm.
plotting is and how it all fit together. And I'm like, how did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's cool. That's
I have
great.
no idea how I pulled that off, but there it is. So,
Can you tell us anything about it or when it's going to be
the
out?
new novel, I don't know. They haven't given me a pub date yet.
Okay.
Yes, I can tell you that it's set in New Mexico territory shortly before the Civil War.
Mm.
And when the country was in complete chaos because of slavery, abolition,
Mm-hmm.
just tremendous upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Lily's children, who you haven't met, even if you've read all 6 of the novels, goes west to be a nurse midwife in New Mexico territory.
Oh,
And it's kind of a transition novel. I don't know if you've read The Gilded Hour or
I
Dawn.
have it. I
Okay.
have both, but I haven't read them yet.
Okay. Well, so the new novel is kind of a transition novel between the first series and the second series. The first series ends in 1824.
Mm-hmm.
The second series begins in 1884.
Right.
83.
Right. Yeah.
So this is in 1857. And basically, it's just because people are always asking me, well, what happened to these families in the last 40 years? We want to know. And I'm like, well, I'm going to write this novel. You might not like all of it that's happened, but it'll give you at least a picture. So,
cool.
So that's
Can't wait. Yay. So, as we finish our conversation, I wonder what advice you might offer aspiring writers, considering today's publishing landscape and sort of considering all of your experiences.
Yeah, I would say that if you have a story in you that needs to come out, to write it down. It's a compulsion. People write not because they want to, people who really write, but because they have to.
Sure.
And, they need to tell the story. They need to get it down.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then do that. But be aware that it might never find a larger audience, and not because it doesn't deserve one, but just because of the way the world is right now. But if you can have small expectations, like I never expected Homestead to join. It came out with a very small publisher, and it won the Penn Hemingway. I thought, huh? I was shocked.
Yeah.
But I really, really thought that would be a very quiet novel that would just, find a few readers and then go away. But it's still being read. Jimmy.
That's great.
Yeah. So that would be my advice. That and George Orwell, if I think it gives you the best, truest word about writing fiction. Have you ever read any of his stuff about writing fiction?
No.
Oh boy.
I'll add it to my list.
It's like he says, nobody would do that. It's like it's some terrible disease that you wouldn't do this if you could do anything else. Yep. So yeah.
Wow. Well, that's great advice. It's just been such a delight to chat with you. I love your writing. It's absolutely beautiful. It really, really spoke to my soul, and I just got lost in the books. And
well, I can't tell you how much that means to me. It means a great deal from someone who is so involved in the industry and storytelling and who's writing fiction. I wish you best of luck with your novel.
Yeah, fingers crossed that it lands somewhere and it'll be something you can buy one day. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. Is it a historical? It's not historical.
So the one that I just finished is not. It's actually about a young woman who becomes an Orthodox Jew and is having a hard time leaving her past life behind, and then it sort of catches up with her, and she has to decide which one she's going to choose.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And, I spent 10 years in the Orthodox community myself. So I have had feet in both worlds and it was really fun to write. But it was interesting because, I didn't plan it out. I wrote like 50 pages 10 years ago, and then I came back to it when I got back to writing and had to totally change everything around.
Of course. Well, you were a different person.
Oh
at that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. I had perspective and
Yeah.
did research and took the time and I really love it now. And so we'll see if anybody else does.
Yeah.
But I spent a month this year in Scotland in the Highlands and I went on a writing sabbatical and I started writing a historical novel there and I got 20,000 words done
Wow.
when I realized I need more research. And so I
Yeah.
sort of pivoted to the research
Uh-huh.
and I was in the Highlands, but the
Uh-huh.
characters and I'm committed to writing fiction that involves Jewish characters in some way. That's just
Uh-huh.
something that's interesting to me. And so I was finding two historical individuals who actually lived
Uh-huh.
in Scotland and they were Jewish and it was in the 19th century. And
Yeah.
it's possible their paths crossed. I haven't yet found that, but in my book they do.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
so but they were in Glasgow and then they ended up in London. And so I was in the Highlands. So I thought, well, I need to really understand those cities. And
Mhm.
I was in both of them many, many years ago. So
Yeah.
I don't have, tangible, tactile memories. And so I feel
Right.
like I might need a trip to the
Yeah.
UK again.
I guess you might.
Walk the streets and learn the
I have to
sounds.
ask you this. I'm
Yeah.
sure you're familiar with a novel called The Physician by
Yeah.
Noah. You know that novel, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
He's not a Jew, but he ends up going, I think, where is it? Persia. That
Uh-huh.
it's to become a
Uh-huh.
physician,
Uh-huh.
and he has to pose as a Jew, but he becomes enamored of the religion. Do you know that? You know that novel?
I've heard of it. I have not read it.
Oh, you should.
Okay.
It's incredibly well done,
Okay.
and at least I don't know that history and well enough to declare it completely accurate, but I think you might find that very interesting.
Actually,
So,
one of my characters was the first Jewish doctor in Scotland. And
oh,
so that's really kind of chilling that you would suggest it not knowing that. And so I
yeah,
definitely have to check it out. No
yeah,
question.
please do. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember his name. Noah's his first name, and The
Okay.
Physician is the name of the first book. So,
Okay. Well,
all
it's
right.
interesting because the
Yeah.
character is his real name was Asher.
Oh,
And
I love it.
my oldest son's name is Asher. And so it was his first and last name. And I just thought that was so cool that
That is very
I
cool.
wanted to learn more. And now we're deep into the novel. So we'll see
Yeah.
where it goes. So
Yeah. Well, good luck with it.
thank you, Rosina.
And
It's such a delight to speak with you. And I hope we'll stay in touch. And I can't wait
yes,
to read your next
yeah,
book.
and I'll look forward to reading yours.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you so
bye-bye.
much.
Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast with Lynne Golodner. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like what you've heard, subscribe and share this episode with the meaningful people in your world. And please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more at makemeaning.org or lynnegolodner.com.